Welcome to In a Nutshell, the podcast dedicated to all things agricultural consulting. I'm Dylan Brush here with soil genius and ag consultant Bill Brush, and we're delighted to accompany you on this journey where we break down the different aspects of agricultural consulting. In each episode, we'll dive into the realm of agriculture through the eyes of Bill Brush, where consultants like Bill play a vital role in empowering farmers, agribusiness, and agricultural organizations. If you're passionate about agriculture, problem solving, and enjoy a little bit of detective work, this podcast is tailor-made for you.
Yeah, welcome back again. I promised I was going to start on these, and now this will be the first of many short little snippets on gardening. And if you aren't a gardener, I think it's really rewarding to grow your own food, to watch the growing process, and to make it better than you can buy it in the store if you really want to put in the effort to do it. And so there's lots of great gardeners out there, and they can tell you a lot, maybe in a lot of cases more. But as a consultant working with crops over the year, I'm going to give you my take on it, and maybe even those gardeners have been doing it a long time, if they happen to listen to this, may find something that they find interesting also and helpful to them as they try to get better and better at what they're trying to do. And this is like really simple, basic stuff today, because what we want to do is when you're going to start, what is your garden going to be? It can be as simple as just a straight little box, above ground box that you've filled with soil, and it's got some kind of a retaining wall, whether it be a block or whether it may be from wood, or if it's just built down into the soil and you have a retaining wall around it, maybe a plastic underneath to hold it. So that could be whatever you have, but whatever it is, it could be on a larger scale too. It could be just a lot of flower bed, or it could be a half an acre of open ground, a big half acre that you want to make a big garden out of. It could be huge. It could be a couple acres. I mean, this is a full-time commercial growing operation if you're starting to get to that level. But regardless of what size it is, always start, and I sound sometimes like a broken record, but start with a soil test, because it'll tell you what's in your soil and what's not. It's going to tell you how much sand, silt, and clay is in your soil. How much can I put into it? If it's super sandy, maybe I need to get a lot of organic material and build it in there to break it down and try to give me more areas to do that. Or maybe I'm going to go back and I want to find some heavier soil, bring it to my box or my flower beds, and mix it in together and make a heavier soil than I currently had to give it so it's got more holding capacity, more water holding capacity, as well as nutrients. All of these things will be really important. But it comes back, whether it's gardening, farming, if you're not sure or you have no idea what is in your soil, then how do you know what to add? Again, you may read books, you may read articles, and they tell you, oh, for the best tomatoes, add this much of these nutrients, and you're going to have a winner every time. Not if I've oversupplied those already in this at some point in time. I don't know where the soil came from. Some of it's been laid down for a long, long time. So what you look at when you do that is soil tests to find out what I can add and what I need to stay away from. And then balance and find those products that can deliver to you the nutrients you need. And also, it's got to be drainable, so those things that you don't want don't build up in that soil. You want it to move through the soil. We'll talk a little bit more about that as you design your garden plot. The next thing you need to do is measure your plot. Find out how many square feet you have, because a lot of the information you'll see written will tell you how many pounds, how many ounces, or whatever per acre that you need to apply. Because a lot of things are done on a commercial basis, and they're large entities. Well, so I've got a small plot here. I don't really know how many square feet it is, so I measure it, and I find out I have so many square foot in this plot. And why is that important? Well, if you took an acre and found out the number of square feet in that acre, it would be 43,560 square feet, okay? So if you take however many square feet yours are and divide it by 43,560, you will get what fraction of an acre you have. An easy one, I always like to tell people this, because this is one thing that's easy to do, is if you have 4,350 square feet, you have 1/100th of an acre. So if there is a soil amendment that they tell you want to apply at 2,000 pounds per acre, well, I need to add 1/100th of that to my area. Okay? So I need 20 pounds to be spread over that 4,350 square feet. Really simple. It doesn't always work that much. You could have a larger area where you have 43,000 square feet and you have, like I say, an acre, or 4,300, you have 1/100th of an acre, or 435 square feet, pardon me, you have 1/100th of an acre. 4,350 square feet, you have 1/10th of an acre, and then you can do those. If you're even down to 2,000, well, now you're down to, 1/200th of an acre. You can still do the math. It's fairly simple, and find out exactly what you want. A lot of good soil labs, if you say this is a garden plot and I like my recommendations in pounds per square foot, and they will do that for you. They'll do, and the good ones, if you're on a metric system, you happen to be out of the country, they would tell you on kilograms per hectares, So they will get in whatever units that you're accustomed to and want to. I know a lot of people when they're gardening, they do a lot of the tillage, and there's not a lot of herbicides used because they weed them by hand. But when you lay out your garden plot, understand what am I want to plant? What are the things that I want to grow in my garden? And it'd be great if we could just grow them at any time, but depending on your weather, there are things that are more adapted to be grown in the wintertime, particularly the cold crop, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, those kind of things, those brassicas would be better served in those colder temperatures as opposed to things like lettuce, which will also grow but won't be quite as successful. It shuts down, but some things will be froze. You can't grow those. You got to get those crops that fit your weather pattern, and so that's what you're going to. The other thing you need to do when you're testing out what I want to do, some things grow really good in rows, so you have to make beds, and you've got to bed those things up so that you can either lay a drip hose on top of the bed and soak it into your bed that way, or you can run water down those beds and let it sub into the middle of that bed and get your watering that way. Some crops, like tomato plants, can be grown on the row, or they can be grown more upright, and you can put a cage over them and grow more up on a hill where you can irrigate around there and let that water sub it up around on the moat all the way around that hill and sub it in that way. And other things like squash, zucchini squash, particularly crookneck, those kinds, they like to be grown on hills. Normally you'll put 2 or 3 plants, or 2 or 3 seeds if you're doing that, or 2 or 3 plants if you're getting transplants to do that. It is a good way to start. Eggplant, there's several things, and a lot of the what I found is looking at the seed packs, if you're buying them that way, or if you're saving them over, there's lots of good information. When I was a kid, the internet didn't exist, and so to find the information you can easily get on the internet today was much more difficult to come by, and so we had to dig it out of publications and find things that would be the best to grow things, and all the things that needed to be applied. I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between when you're planting, what are you trying to accomplish when you're planting? Sometimes seeds work really well. I've seen probably more people misplant seeds than on transplants. Everybody understands, I got this plant, I'm planting it to the level that it's grown to, and that's where the dirt I come up to, and then I let those roots expand, I water it, and off it takes. But on seeds, they can be too deep, they can be too shallow. It depends what it is you're trying to germinate. A good rule of thumb is the smaller the seed, the closer it needs to be applied to the top of the soil. The bigger the seed, the deeper it can be planted to the soil. And when I'm saying deep, I'm not talking 4 to 6 inches down there. I'm talking the difference between a couple inches to just barely a little line in there, the seeds applied, and then just barely covered over. The reason being is in the germination process, that is, That seed has so much energy in it. And when it only has a finite amount of energy, it has to have enough energy to germinate, put out roots, and start to put a plumule or a shoot towards the surface. You can imagine, I'll exaggerate, I plant it, 3 feet deep, I get it wet. A little baby seed is not going to have enough energy to grow all the way to the surface. So the smaller the seed, the closer you plant it to the surface. Real good rule of thumb. You get something like a squash seed or corn kernel or something you're planting like that, it can be planted down a couple inches and have enough energy. Again, if you have a bigger kernel, it can be a little deeper, not marginally, but just a little bit, or a very, very small kernel with not near as much energy, and they can have the same genetic material and the ability to produce the same corn, whether it's small or large seeded, but it has to get out. It has to put a plumule up so it can start photosynthesis. Those roots have to get into nutrients almost immediately, and one of the things you want to make sure that there's ample amount in a seeded crop is phosphate, to stimulate root development, to let it seek nutrients out, and as soon as it gets into some phosphate, it begins to flush around that phosphate and looking for more. And you get a good establishment of whether it be a seed or, a transplant. So if you're going to do transplants, one of the good things to apply with your transplant water as you're watering them in is a little bit of phosphate, and it usually comes with a little bit of nitrogen. It could be like a 10-30, or it could be an 8-24. Regardless of what the analysis is, meaning 8% nitrogen, 24% phosphorus, and maybe 2% potassium, something like that as a starter would be really helpful for almost all your transplants. Your seed, it's going to go right into that soil. You don't want to overwater it because that seed could actually rot from getting too wet and not getting enough air and water to be able to create its germination process. So there's a lot of things to go in there. We'll talk about planting a garden, and it'll be a whole section, but I'm wanting you to consider, because when you're laying out your plots, where do I want my beds? Where do I want my hills? How am I going to irrigate it? And you design an irrigation system, because over here you may find that these plants, the lettuces or the greens, leafy greens, can get by with, even in hot temperatures, a couple of irrigations a week, whereas over here on my tomato vines, I need to get them 3 times a week. So you need to change your irrigation system so that you can do that. A good way to fertilize, of course, is to put it right in with the water as you do that. And there's lots of good things in your local hardware store, the large ones, with things that you can do. Soaker hoses that have really come in to be really, really handy. There's more and more stuff that hasn't always been around, but it's things that you can use, and you will find that I think it would be very advantageous for you to start to look at those things. Drip irrigation is a good way to go, and you can put timers on them. One of the things about gardens, when you commit to a garden, you kind of committed to be around it. So if you're somebody that travels a lot, you're going to have to put in an automated type system. And they're not, it sounds like a lot of work. It really isn't that much. It used to be, anybody that's got a lawn or flower beds probably has got some kind of an automated system already. A lot of those are available on smaller scales. Unless you've got a quarter, a half acre of garden, then you probably want to put the bigger system on there. And remember, when you invest in that kind of stuff, it's for the long term. You don't plan to do it one time and forget about it. So these are just some of the things when you design your garden plot as to where I need to put my rows, and then how am I going to orient them? What's the easiest way to get them irrigated? How am I going to harvest those, depending on how far it is, if I don't leave enough room to get alongside of over the top or wherever it is I need to get. So there's a lot going into design. So these are just a few of the things to get you started. But as I always like to start, and if you've listened to my previous podcast, get that soil test. Get your garden the way you want it. Get that soil test in and get it started, so that then when it comes time to incorporate all those things that soil test tells you need, you can incorporate them into your top 4 to 6 inches, and you're ready to go to work and get planted. And then when we'll talk more about harvest and after harvest as we go through a little section on harvest, a little section on growing, a little section on what you'll do later. So for now, that's just something to get you started. How am I going to do it? Where am I going to put it? How am I going to irrigate it? And then get a soil test to see what nutrients we add to make it as good as we can. And then we'll talk about some things. One of the things I see a lot of gardeners do, and I'll close with this. A lot of them will tell me, I don't know how many have told me, I said, you really are putting things on you don't need, and your compost has got to stop. Well, they have to put the compost on. That's just a given. You know, I'm a gardener, and the compost, this big, black, beautiful compost has got to go on there. But if you don't know what's in that compost, how do you know it's not hurting you? If it's got high phosphates, then how do you know that I've already got way too much? And I'm wondering why my garden's not doing as well as it should. Could very well be you're adding something so that you don't need, and you're actually increasing that law of the maximum to where you're putting on that, and it's what's really holding back your quality and your growth. So I'll close with that till next time. Keep growing.
Thank you for another absolutely amazing episode of Agriculture in a Nutshell, Bill. I'm sure that everyone listening very much so appreciated listening to what you had to say about some gardening. I know that I did. As for everyone listening, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and always stay curious.